All right. Well, good evening. We're going to ask you to find a seat if you haven't got one. So, everybody all right? Here we go. All right, listen. Charlie is in New Orleans visiting his dad for his 93rd birthday. Not Charlie's 93rd birthday, but his dad's 93rd birthday. So I get to lead music tonight. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. I'll be here all week. That's Elvis. Hey, he's not in the building. So anyway, we are glad you're here tonight. You're in for a very special treat as we get to meet our guests and they get to share with us what God is doing in their life and what God is doing with the ministry in which He's given them. So we just want you to sit back. Can I ask questions? Sure. Make sure it's prevalent to this. Don't ask them what the price of eggs is or anything like that because, what would be the price of eggs back in your time?
We didn't have eggs.
You didn't have eggs?
Didn't bring any.
Really? Wow. See, I've learned something already. I thought we always had eggs. Well, here's another question. Which came first? The chicken or the egg? Never mind. I'm not going to put that on you. The Pilgrims came first. Good answer. Good answer. All right, we're going to sing this night. So if you've got a hymn book, there's one right in front of you. It's blue, and it says hymnal on it. Number 473. Now, everybody knows this song. So because you know it, I have to sing it. And you'll be glad for that. But I'm going to ask you to stand up if you will, because we sing better when we're standing up. 473. Now, there are how many verses in this? There are 3 verses, right, guys? All right, so we're going to do all 3 verses. 3 verses. All right. Now, this is in 4/4 time, which means absolutely nothing to me. So just listen to the music and sing with them and it'll be a lot better off. Let's sing. You need a hymnal? You need a hymnal? You need a hymnal? He can give you. Oh, okay. All right, here we go. We're going to try it again. I heard an old story, how a Savior came from glory. I gave His life on Calvary to save a wretch like me. I heard about His glory, what His precious blood tells of me. Then I repented of my sins and won the victory. Oh, victory in Jesus, my Savior forever. He sought me and He bought me with His redeeming blood. He loved me ere I knew Him, and all of His glory. He plunged me to victory beneath the cleansing flood. All right, hang on. I just realized I muted my microphone. How embarrassing is that? On purpose. Listen, you guys did a really good job, but I'm a very competitive person. So second verse is ladies only. And then third verse is going to be men only. And men, we're going to rock the house tonight. Whatever that means. So ladies, second verse, I will start you and then I'm going to turn it over to you. Ladies, what's the second verse? Here we go. Jesus came and brought to me the
you did well. But I can see you haven't done a lot of karaoke. So men, now it's our opportunity. Guys, we can really bust this thing loose tonight. And I don't know how to tell you this, but there is a prize to the winning, men or women. The good news is I'm the judge. So, guys, this is our verse, third verse. The ladies join us on the chorus. Here we go. I heard about a mansion. Listen, I've got to declare a winner on this. You guys want to help me? Men or women? Who won, men or women? All right, how many think the women won? You're on our side, brother. What are you doing? He's like, oh yeah, they won. Let's face facts. All right, I declare we have to have a recount. This is Florida. You may be seated. Well, thank you again for coming. Couple quick announcements. We're out of bulletins, and I apologize for that, but that's a good sign because we used them all this morning. So we print 3,000 of these on Sunday morning, so that just tells you what our crowd was like this morning. A couple things I do want to bring your attention. Young at Heart be going this Thursday to Word of Life. The Triumphant Quartet leaves. They're going to stay there. We're going out there. Bus leaves at 2 o'clock, and I think you're going to, I'm looking for somebody to help me with this. Where are y'all going to dinner? Sonny's? Yes, Sonny's Barbecue. Okay, so that's Thursday. Tonight, Lottie Moon Christmas offering. If you have not had the opportunity to give to that, $38.85 has been received year to date. Our goal was $4,500. So if you haven't given to that, please, and you feel led so, we invite you to do that. Church lunch. Teresa said, "What is a church lunch?" I said, "It's called Dinner on the Grounds." We just changed the name of it because we're trying to be contemporary. How's that working for you? Did you know, by the way, just as a point of information, you'll probably go back and be amazed when you get back. Did you know that if you take the initials of Dinner on the Ground, what's it spell? Dog. All right, let's go over this again. D-O-G, okay? But if you reverse that, what's it spell? God. I know. This is a tough group. I'm telling you right now, you got your hands full tonight. You really do. But those are a couple things coming up. And that Dinner on the Ground is Sunday, the 29th of January. It'll be at 12:30 in the Family Life Center. We just invite you to bring a covered dish, your favorite covered dish. The church will provide the meat and the drinks and all the other stuff that goes with that as well. So, you guys did a great job of singing. You really did. Zach, wow. I don't know, this guy here you kind of sounded like George Beverly Shea, but he's dead. I don't know how to say that, but anyway. All right, let's sing again. Let's turn to 435. I'm going to ask, you can remain seated this time. What a friend we have in Jesus. What a friend we have in Jesus.
Yeah.
right, well, let me introduce our special guest, pray, and then we'll introduce them. And Father, we thank you tonight for the privilege of being able to come and to worship, to learn and to grow, to be together with your people in your house. We just ask tonight, Lord, for your presence, and we know that it's here, and pray that you will speak words that will just encourage us and enlighten us and refresh us and remind us of what we were founded on and what's so valuable that we seem to have forgotten in our country. So we ask your blessings on all that we do tonight now. We ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
And amen.
Well, I have the privilege tonight of introducing, and I really shouldn't. It should be Cindy or Brian should be doing this, but I'll do it because Brian's back there with the baby and Cindy's with her purse. So, but they have, and Linda, they've all met Leo and Nancy. That's what I was getting ready to say. That I just didn't have my notes with me. Have you ever forgot her name?
Yeah.
Have you? Mm-hmm. How'd that go? How'd that go?
Married 49 years.
It went well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Leo and Nancy Martin, and they are from Plymouth, Massachusetts. Born and raised there?
Born in Boston.
Boston, okay. That's pretty close, isn't it?
Pretty close.
It is.
Yeah.
And they have, I hope you got one of these when you came in. It's called the Jenny Center. I can't pronounce that word. It's interpretive center. It's got 3 syllables in it. This is what they do. Now, obviously, this time of year you can't because it's probably snowing in Boston tonight.
A little bit.
Yeah. But they have this this ministry that God's provided them, and Brian and Cindy and Linda came back, and the students that went up there, I think it was last year, came back just so excited about everything that they were doing up there and what they had learned and what they'd grown. Now, I took a little bit off of your website, or Brian gave it to me rather. It says you guys teach about the Pilgrims and the impact that they had on the founding and ongoing development of our country, so that we in turn can teach the next generation about our Christian foundation. Because as you know, the Christian foundation is slowly eroding away from us, and we're so very grateful for your ministry and your job.
Thank you.
And so, with anything else, I'm not going to say anything else because I've kind of pretty much ruined everything with my singing, but I know you guys will bail me out. So would you make them feel welcome this evening?
Yes. Go ahead.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. I took my glasses off so I would look like a pilgrim, and now I can't see your faces, so you're either smiling at me or you're glaring at me one way or the other. I'm never going to know the difference. So my name is Nancy, as Pastor just said, and my job at the Jenny is to help to promote whatever we're doing there, whether it's bringing in groups like Linda and Cindy brought last year, or people coming in every day, travelers just coming as families. So we've been doing what we're doing in Plymouth for 22 years. We were young kids when we started, and we're starting our 22nd year in April. So we open in April, and we give tours every day, except for Sunday. That's the day of rest, right? Actually got challenged by a pastor years ago, because we were open 7 days a week, 360-something days a year. The only days we closed was Christmas and Easter and Thanksgiving. And he said, why don't you challenge God and try closing on Sunday? And so it was like a brain thing. I never even thought of that. So we talked about it, closed, and never looked back. So we're not there on Sundays, and we know we disappoint a lot of people because we're not there, but that's the way life is. So don't come on a Sunday. So we do hope that you will come and visit us. Leo does a walking tour of the town, takes you through the whole town, and shows you all the important parts of our history, where they landed, the Pilgrims, where they lived, why they came, all of that. And then we do a covenant talk, which is about the covenant that the Pilgrims made with God and how we have broken it today and how we need to get back to that covenant. And then we have an economic program that we do, which talks all about the Pilgrims and what they believed in economics. And we also have our wonderful national monument to the Forefathers. So for those of you, who has been? Not too bad. Who's coming? Even better. All right. So we'll see you guys next spring, summer, or fall. But this, Leo is going to actually, as if you were coming to us, this is what he would do. He would take you up to the top of the hill and give you a tour of the National Monument to the Forefathers. I have to be really careful what I say because we have been married for 49 years and I don't want to step on his toes by telling you one thing that he is going to tell you. So I have to be very careful. But he does a wonderful job. I know you'll enjoy it. Even if you have heard it, you always learn something new every time. And I do want to thank you guys. Thank you, Linda, for hosting us, and Cindy and Brian for inviting us here, and for all of you guys coming out to tonight. And at the end, we'll probably do questions because we want to keep Leo on his, his groove. So if you have a question, hold it, and he will. We'll do a little question and answer at the end. So right now, I just want to introduce my husband, Leo Martin. I hope you enjoy the presentation.
Everybody hear me? Thank you very much for clapping. I usually have to get the crowd to clap for her because I need the points. Right, so thank you for clapping for my wonderful wife. Linda was kind enough to bring her monument, so when we get done here, if you'd like to come up and inspect the monument, that was produced by Kirk Cameron, and so if you get a chance to come out and check it out, that would be kind of nice. As a matter of fact, Kirk came up to Plymouth in 2013, and he made a movie called Monumental. Anybody see Monumental? Good. Now, I was a consultant for Kirk in the movie. And he filmed me in it. And he cut me out. Yeah. He told me I had a face made for radio. I'm only kidding. He'd never say that, but he did cut me out. And I still call him my friend. Go figure. But without Kirk, Kirk is doing such great work. We support him 100%. And you know he's going to libraries to read a Christian Child's book in response to the gay movement, and my wife is getting the book, and we're going to go to the Plymouth Library and ask them if we can do that. Good. To which they'll say no. But we won't go away. We will keep pushing, and Kirk's 100% behind us on that. Okay, that being said, we got to talk about the Forefathers Monument. Oh, by the way, did you notice we're dressed different? Yeah, this is the way a pilgrim would dress back in the 1600s, and that's why we do it. But an important point to make is they didn't always dress in black, brown, and gray. They actually did wear colorful clothing. As a matter of fact, William Brewster, the elder of the church, preached in an emerald green coat. So this black, brown, and gray thing is really not true. We were very colorful people. And we did get along to a certain degree. 102 came on the Mayflower, 51 died the first winter. Today, there are over 30 million descendants from the Mayflower. Wow. 30 million from 51. Guess they didn't social distance, did they? Could I have the next slide? This is the first time I'm doing it without being in control of the slides, so this is going to be a rocky moment. We'll see how it goes. National Monument to the Forefathers. Let me give you an idea where this thing came from. The original donation for the Forefathers Monument was taken during George Washington's administration. It was completed in 1889. It took longer to build this monument than any monument in our country's history, simply because we had a little fundraising problem right in the middle. We call that fundraising problem the Civil War. Money virtually stopped. Not completely. There was one gentleman from Washington, D.C. who did take out the time to send a check in support of the monument, a $10 check. That gentleman's name is Abraham Lincoln. If you could advance there we go. This monument was designed by a gentleman, an architect from Boston, by the name of Hammett Billings. Now, Hammett Billings was a good Christian man. His favorite book of the Bible, Revelation. In Boston, he had over 60 portraits of Revelation in his work, and we will see a little over here in the monument. He was also an abolitionist. He did the drawings for the original Uncle Tom's Cabin, written by Harriet Beecher Stowe. I think we've got a pit. There's Hammett Billings right there. This is what happened. We needed a monument to honor the forefathers. The Mayflower Society put together a little contest. These were the rules. You would enter the contest. If you won, you would get a $400 prize and the contract. A gentleman from New York City entered, and he won. Well, the day before he's going to get the contract, Hammett Billings called the Mayflower Society, says to them, "What's the matter with you people? You can't give this contract to someone from New York City. You've got to give it to someone from Boston, me." They said, "What are you going to do about it? The contest is over." He says, "I'll tell you what I'll do about it. I'll design 2 monuments. I'll design this one in the portico over Plymouth Rock, and I'll raise the money for both." Well, second he said, "I'll raise the money for both," contest over. Guy from New York got the $400, Hammett Billings got the contract, and we have had a competition with New York ever since, just the way it's worked out. Could we have the next slide? He did the drawings, by the way, for Uncle Tom's Cabin, and there's Uncle Tom's Cabin. Next slide, please. By the way, if you come to Plymouth and go down to Plymouth Rock, the portico over Plymouth Rock is not Hammett Billings. Unfortunately, his was taken down in 1918, crushed and dumped into Plymouth Harbor, saving only 5 pieces, the 4 clamshells on either side of the walkways, and my wife and I have a piece of it in front of our building. The rest of it, by the way, is in Plymouth Harbor. Why, you ask? Politics. It was done in 1920. 1920 was our 300th anniversary. Another organization wanted to take credit for the monument, so they tore his down and put their own up. Some things never change, folks. Next slide. Now that I gave you a general idea where the monument came from, I have to give you an idea where the Pilgrims came from, and this makes absolutely no sense. The Pilgrims were a product of a little bump in the road back in Europe in the 15 and 1600s. We call that bump in the road the Reformation. And because people could read the Bible for the first time, they discovered they no longer needed a king or a priest or a bishop to intercede between them and God. They could talk to God themselves. In other words, they could pray. But here's the thing with the Pilgrims. They thought God talked back to them, a two-way conversation. Folks, if you go from a place in your life where someone's talking to God for you to having a two-way conversation, you're certainly going to change. Your faith will be different and your moral standard. And faith and morality are what we call an inward governance, a change in the inside. And whoever you are on the inside will reflect who you are on the outside. And as we look at our monument, we're going to see 5 statues. The first 2, faith and morality, inward governance. The next 3, law, education, liberty, external. And we'll see how the internal affects the external. But what about the Pilgrims? What's their story? Back in the 1600s, the Pilgrims had a little problem with a gentleman back in England by the name of King James. Now, what's the problem they had with him? He was the King of England and the head of the Anglican Church. When King James set the law in England, he set the law for everybody. Everybody in England sat under the same rule of law, except King James. He was above the law. He didn't have to follow his own law. Not only that, if you belonged to the church, the Anglican Church, and you wanted to pray, knock your lights out, pray all day long, as long as the subject of your prayer was King James. He thought he was God, divine right of kings. Kind of rubbed our pastor the wrong way. John Robinson, the pastor of the Pilgrims, took his folks out of the Anglican Church and they started church in their homes. In other words, the Pilgrims separated from the Church of England. That's why we're called separatists. Another group back then, theologically similar to the Pilgrims, stayed in the Anglican Church and tried to purify it from within. We call them the Puritans. They came 10 years later and founded Boston. But folks, this is a very big difference. Because when John Robinson did that, separated from the church, he never wanted to see one person in charge of everything ever again like the king. So he had his congregation elect him pastor, not appoint him. Appoint him, you can't get rid of him. Elect him, you can dump him. But you know what that did for us, folks? That started self-rule in our country. The result, the Mayflower Compact. First document to self-rule where we elected John Carver, the first freely elected official in the United States, all based on the fact that Robinson never wanted to see one person in charge of everything ever again. Of course, the question has to be this. What in the world did John Robinson come up with this self-rule thing in the first place? See, back then there was no self-rule. Everything was tyrannical. Well, he came up with it when he started reading the Bible. And in the Old Testament, he came across a little passage called the Dominion Charter. We're to take dominion over the earth, over the animals, birds, fish, things that creep and crawl. But he also read this, not each other. Robinson read, We're all made in the image of God. His thinking was, if we're all made in the image of God, then no human being has a right to be above another human being without their consent. Self-rule, civil government is a biblical principle. You cannot have civil government without biblical law. And the way I like to explain it to people is this: you want me to be king? Happy to do it. I'll take the job. And you know what I'm going to do today? I'm going to set the law. You know what I'm going to do next week? Change it in my favor. But I can't change God's law. Without that truth, without that constant, you cannot have a civil government. John Adams, the second president of the United States, said this about the Constitution: it was written for a moral and religious person. It is wholly inadequate for the governance of anybody else. But he's not the only one to say it. So does the Forefathers Monument. National monument to the forefathers, erected by a grateful people in remembrance of their labors, sacrifices, and sufferings for the cause of civil and religious liberty. Folks, they're not separate. You can't have a civil liberty without a religious liberty. You cannot have a civil government without a religious government. It will not work. The wall of separation between church and state was never written in the Constitution. It was never written in the Declaration of Independence. It was written in a letter from President Jefferson to the Baptist Church in Danbury, Connecticut, when they asked him, what happens when the federal government interferes with how I worship? It will never happen, said the president. There's a wall of separation between church and state to protect the church from the state, not the state from the church. So folks, what I'd like to do is look at the monument, all 5 statues. The first 2, faith and morality. Faith and morality, the 2 inward governance. Faith is facing the ocean. She's actually facing the exact route the Pilgrims took when they left Europe to come here to start a new life based on biblical law. She's standing on a rock. That's Plymouth Rock. To us, Plymouth Rock is a sign of the overthrow of tyranny. We left Europe, we broke the chains of tyranny, stepped on Plymouth Rock and found the piece of the Bible. And if you look up into a hand, change it please, you will see the Bible. The Geneva Bible. The first mass-produced Bible in the world, relatively easy to read because it listed chapter and verse for the first time. Inexpensive, and 1/3 of the Geneva Bible was footnotes. That's virtually the first study Bible. But I do have to bring up another book, the King James Bible. See, the King James Bible is a direct result of the Geneva Bible. King James didn't like the Geneva Bible. Why didn't he like it? The footnotes. The footnotes would have told you King James was not God. Well, that did not sit well with the king. Write me a new Bible, put my name on it, make me God, and get rid of the footnotes. Unfortunately for the king, he hired the same folks that wrote the Geneva Bible, pretty much came out the same way, no footnotes, but he was still not God. So folks, if you got a King James, hang on to it, pretty darn good book, just has the wrong guy's name on it. Might also notice that Bible appears to be open a little, as there were a breeze blowing through the pages of that Bible. If you would ask the Pilgrims and say, oh, that's no breeze. That's a spirit, the Holy Spirit. You cannot have that change on the inside unless you're filled with the Holy Spirit and it reflects who you are on the outside. That Bible represents the Holy Spirit. Next slide, please. On her forehead, you'll see a star. That represents honor. Honor of education. People come visit me, they believe our Pilgrim children were uneducated because we didn't have a formal school. Nothing could be further from the truth. They were well educated. They learned at home. Their parents taught them. They even had a textbook back then. We call that textbook the Bible today. But they had supplementary materials. Governor Bradford himself brought over 400 books with him on the Mayflower. The governor could speak 5 languages. See if I can put this education thing in perspective. Back in Massachusetts, we have this little institution called Harvard University. Now, Harvard University was founded by a gentleman by the name of John Harvard, and he founded it, and he gave his library to the university to start the university. William Bradford brought more books with him on the Mayflower than John Harvard donated to Harvard University. Kind of puts things in perspective. That's how important education was. And of course, he's pointing up towards heaven. A little more than that now, folks. Now that we're talking to God, he's talking to us. We have a relationship. God's touching us. We're touching him. The faith of our pilgrims brought them in from Europe to Plymouth to start a new life based on biblical law. Next slide, please. That's a view of the way they came in from Europe. Next slide. One more. I can't see that. Okay. Faith. Now we'll move on to morality, the second of the inward governance. People love it when I do morality. Oh, yeah. Anyway, morality. This young lady. Morality, she represents both the Old and the New Testaments. In one hand, she has the Ten Commandments, Old Testament. In the other hand, rolled up neatly in her lap, the scroll of Revelation, the last book of the Bible. On her head, and you might notice she has a breastplate, very similar to the breastplate of the high priest of the Old Testament. Why is that there? Now, because the Pilgrims believed they were priests. And what was their priestly mission? Moving a church from Europe to Plymouth to start a new life based on biblical law. That was the mission. I get a lot of rub from people when I talk about the Old Testament. We got the New Testament. We don't need the Old Testament. Nothing could be further from the truth, folks. We use them together. We use them together. People say to me, well, in the Old Testament, all this bloodshed, all this stuff going on. What's the deal? I said, well, there's a great lesson in the Old Testament. Anybody here ever notice that in the Old Testament that we made these covenants with God? Yeah. And did you know we broke every one of them? But every time we stayed with the covenant, things were great. The second we broke the covenant, things went crazy. And I laugh. I'm probably the only person on earth that laughs when they read the Old Testament. But I laugh at it because I say, but these people were nuts. They kept doing the same thing over and over again and getting the same results. What's the matter with these people? Here's the bad news. We're still doing it today. And what we have to do is look at morality. And we have to understand what it's all about. Now, when we have these smaller statues, on each side of the statues are smaller statues. And on one side of morality is the prophet. See, the prophet in the Old Testament was the person that talked to God for us. But now we're talking to God. We no longer need the prophet. We're the prophet. The only question is this: what do we do with the information we get? We tell other people about it. We evangelize. On the other side, a small statue of an evangelist. The evangelist is to the New Testament what the prophet was to the Old, only now it is us. And underneath each one of these statues is what we call an altar relief cut in marble, a part of the pilgrims' lives. This altar relief is called the embarkation. When our pilgrims separated from the Church of England, it did not sit well with the king. They were forced out of England, went to Holland for 12 years where they could worship freely. While in Holland, the congregation grew to over 300 people. When they came here 12 years later, they knew they were leaving friends and family they would never see again. And they never did see their pastor. John Robinson died before he could get here. But if you take a look at the sadness in that picture, look at the grief. Despite the sadness and grief, they came anyway. Why? They were committed to the cause. And what was that cause? Moving that church from Europe here to start a new life based on biblical law. That was the cause. Despite the sadness, they came anyway. Anybody here find it somewhat interesting that our country was founded on a church plant? Next slide, please. This is half the passenger list from the Mayflower. The other half of the passenger list is on the other side of the monument. And I'm sure there's names you folks have heard of. William Bradford, John Carver, the infamous Miles Standish, the captain of the Army. But there's names here you've never heard before, and you'll never hear them again. And of 102 pilgrims, 51 died the first winter. You'll never know who they are. But over there, a minute ago, I told you God honors the individual. Well, if that is the case, what is this all about? These folks did exactly what God asked them to do. They lost their lives doing it, and nobody will ever know who they are. How in the world does that honor the individual? The point is this: they honored the individual. That first February in Plymouth, there were 7 pilgrims healthy enough to take care of everybody else. But those 7 pilgrims didn't go into a corner and take care of themselves. They took care of their friends. They bathed them, fed them, nursed them. 18 married women came on the Mayflower. 14 died the first winter, sacrificing themselves for the next generation. They honored the individual. And what is the result of what they did? Next slide, please. Law, the first of the external governance. Check that guy out. Take a look at that guy's face. You want to break the law with that guy around? I don't think so. He's got your number. But he also has his hand held up in mercy. In Plymouth, we have law with justice and mercy. What does that mean? The punishment has to equal the crime. One side law, one side justice, one side mercy. Did you know that back in Europe, if you committed a crime and you were convicted, the judge that convicted you did not set the penalty, another judge did, who had nothing to do with the first trial. And if you caught that guy in a bad mood and all you did was steal, he could have your head removed. Very rarely did the punishment equal the crime, but always in Plymouth. I'll give you an example. The first duel in the United States took place in Plymouth, Massachusetts, between 2 young men that came on the Mayflower, a man named Doughty and a man named Lester. Naturally, they were fighting over the attentions of a young woman. What else? Weren't great duelists, nicked each other a little bit, no big deal, but they broke the law and had to be punished. Governor Bradford punished them by tying their hands and feet behind them and together for 24 hours. Well, if you've ever seen anyone in that position, when you get tired, your hands and feet begin to drop. It pulls. It's incredibly painful. They made it 1 hour, begged for mercy. The governor let them go, and they never did duel again. However, all they had to do was ask the young lady. She went back to England, didn't marry either one of them. What can I tell you? It's a guy thing. Advance the slide, please. Justice, again, mercy. And underneath the altar relief, next slide, signing a peace treaty with the Indians. If we're all equal under the law, that means all. We signed a peace treaty with the Indians that lasted 55 years. That is the longest lasting peace treaty with the Indians in our country's history. Now, how does that happen? That happened because they were equal to us, no different. We honored them. They honored us, and we had that 55-year peace treaty where we got together, and Robinson got that for us when he read that Old Testament, we're all made in the image of God. Well, we could not break that. We had to honor the Indians, and we're all made in the image of God, and that's what happened. So we signed this peace treaty that lasted 55 years. I will tell you why it ended in a little while. But folks, if we did what the Pilgrims did today, we'd be much better off. We're all God's children. It's not a tribal society. You look different than me. I can't talk to you. I'm going to be honest with you guys. I'm 100% Irish. I have to deal with it. Yeah, it's the hand I was dealt. What are you going to do? Nonetheless, I'm first an American. I bring my Irish identity with me, but I'm an American. And I want to be equal with all my American friends. Now, that does not mean we're equal in ability, in gifts. We're all different in gifts, but we're all equal in the sight of God. Now, see, I've been told I do a pretty good job speaking in public. You don't want to hear me sing in public. I do not have that gift. So we all have these different gifts, and when we put them together, then we have a whole. And that's the body of Christ. And that's how we have to work. What gift do you have? What gift do you have? Because whatever it is, I'm going to honor you. Oh, by the way, I really am a pilgrim. But I do have to count my steps. Signing that peace treaty changed what happened. And we really need to begin to do that again today. Next slide, please. That's a quote by Governor William Bradford 10 years into the adventure. I'll be getting back to that at the end. Okay, next slide. Education. I cannot overemphasize enough the importance of education. If our children can't read and write, they wouldn't know right from wrong. Education was very, very important. And as you look at the statue of education, you see she has the book of knowledge in her lap, the Bible. On her head, a wreath representing the honor of education. On one side, a small statue of youth. If you could change it to youth. Small statue of youth. You see a mother holding the hand of a child, teaching that child from the Bible, teaching that child right from wrong, how to behave in public, how to honor your adults. But back then, a young couple didn't have all the answers for their children. Where do they go to get those answers? To people who have wisdom, the elders. In other words, the grandparents. See, education was a family affair. Everybody got involved. Because the Pilgrims knew if that biblical education skipped a generation, there would be trouble. Today, I feel trouble. Us old people, we haven't passed down to them what they need to know. See, I told you we signed a peace treaty with the Indians. We signed that peace treaty with a gentleman by the name of Massasoit, chief of the Wampanoag. And Massasoit, the Wampanoag at that time lived in Plymouth and on Cape Cod and in New Bedford and in Rhode Island. He was chief of all of them, very important man, but our friend. Without him signing the peace treaty, the Pilgrims would not have survived. But keep this in mind. 3 years into that peace treaty, Massasoit was at a camp in Rhode Island. The man had the plague. He was dying. A gentleman from Plymouth by the name of Edward Winslow put some herbs together, and Ed Winslow walked to Rhode Island to nurse Massasoit back to health. Winslow walked 40 miles. Halfway there, he was met on a path by an Indian who told him not to bother finishing the trip. Massasoit died. Well, he finished the trip anyway, and he discovered Massasoit had not yet died. He was very close, and Ed Winslow nursed him back to health. From that day forward, they were great friends, and that peace treaty was even stronger. Now we'll move ahead 50 years. 50 years later, we had the King Philip War. King Philip was not a European. He was Massasoit's son. His Christian name was Philip. He went to negotiate not to go to war with the then governor of Plymouth, Josiah Winslow, Edward Winslow's son. While in negotiating, Philip says to Winslow, "Hey, I'm a chief. You're just a governor. I'm not going to talk to you. I'll only talk to kings." They broke off the negotiations and went to war. From that day forward, Philip was referred to as King Philip because he would only talk to kings. And the two men who became great friends, their two sons went to war a generation later. That biblical education skipped that generation. And what was the result? The largest percentage of population was killed in the King Philip War than any war in our country's history, and it could have been stopped. That's how important education is. But I'll be honest, folks, back then they used tools we no longer use. One of those tools is called accountability. People were held accountable for their actions. And if young people misbehaved in public, there would be a punishment. That punishment is called a pillory. A pillory is a board with 3 holes in it, one for your head, the other 2 for your hands. And that pillory be occupied from 8 in the morning till 5 in the afternoon by your parents. They're responsible for your education. And if you misbehaved in public, your parents would be publicly humiliated and punished. And I'll be honest, when I bring school groups up there, I tell them that story, they love it. Oh, they cheer. Until I tell them this, at 5 o'clock, your parents will let go and they go home to you. But why the parents? Children are a gift from God to us. It is our responsibility to raise them properly, and if we do not, there will be a consequence. It may be the pillory. It may be generational. Change slide, please. And there's a statue of wisdom. Anybody notice the resemblance? You know, I really shouldn't do that because people laugh every time. Anyway, on to the next slide. Yeah. There's Massasoit, the chief of the Wampanoag. Next slide, please. Underneath it, signing the Mayflower Compact. Why in the world would that be under education? Because when we're educated from the Bible, we're all made in the image of God. That is the first document to self-rule in our country. Oh, by the way, did you folks know we landed in the wrong place? Yeah, we weren't supposed to land on Cape Cod. We were supposed to land in Northern Virginia. We had no law to be here. Did you also know half the people on the boat weren't separatists? They were coming for other reasons. The separatists are called the saints, the other group the strangers. Now, being a stranger is not a derogatory term. If you and I are in a different congregation back then, we'd refer to each other as strangers. So that doesn't mean they were devoid of faith. They just weren't in our congregation. But nonetheless, we landed here. We had no law to be here. So the strangers looked at the saints and said, you know what? We don't really like you people. We're not sitting under your rule. We're leaving. And there's nothing you can do about it. There's no law to keep us here. And they were right. Except we just landed on the tip of a sandbar in the middle of an ice storm, 102 people, absolutely nothing else. Half are going to leave. John Carver said, you will not sit under our rule. We will have self-rule. Every man on this boat gets a vote. But once a vote's taken, everybody follows the person that won the vote, whether you voted for him or not. He was unanimously elected the first governor of Plymouth, the first freely elected official in our country, all based on the educational principle that we're all made in the image of God. Anybody notice a little miracle just happened? Those people didn't just disagree with us, they didn't like us. Yet they were unanimously electing our guy. Because we live under this covenant, the covenant called the Mayflower Compact, a promise with God that we would start a body politic with God in charge, and we lived under that covenant. But guys, these things don't work unless you practice the greatest commandment, love God, love your neighbor, and love yourself. Because if you don't, it all falls apart, but we did. We loved the Indians. We loved the people that disagreed with us on that boat. Half the Pilgrims died that first winter. So did half the crew members. And the crew member was dying. And he turned to his buddy and he said to him, if you feed me till I die, I'll give you all my stuff. He said, yeah, I'll do that. And he fed him for a week. Then he went back up to him and he said, I thought you said you were going to die. I want your stuff. And he stopped feeding him. And he died. Then that man became sick. And the Pilgrims healed him. And he said to the Pilgrims, we treat each other like dogs, but you Christians, you healed me. And that man became a Christian. Love your neighbor. Love God. And it makes a difference. If we're going to proclaim that we're Christians, people are watching. And we have to represent God the best that we can because they're watching us. And believe me, they want to see us drop the ball. We have to pay attention and do what we can. Next slide. Other half of the passenger list in the Mayflower. And on this passenger list, the first three names of the first three governors. Then the brother of a governor, then William Brewster, the elder of the church. And if you can see under William Brewster's name, he lists what he named his two boys. He named one son Love, the other son Wrestling. He wanted Love to love God. He wanted Wrestling to wrestle with the devil. Come down a little further, you see Humility Cooper. Humility Cooper was named up by her father with the hopes that she would be humble. And I will tell you, if she came home being proud, she'd get her finger right on her nose, and the father would look at her and say to her, excuse me, I did not name you proud, I named you humble. Get with the program. We have Peregrine White up there. Peregrine White was born on the Mayflower in Provincetown Harbor. Peregrine means little wanderer or little pilgrim. See, back then, guys, when we had a birthday party, we did not have ice cream and cake. We had a definition of your name. That's how important naming children was. Next slide, please. My favorite, Liberty. Check that guy out. Look at the muscles on that guy, will you? Check out the breastplate, the helmet, the sword. But look at the sword. It's in the sheath. It's in the defensive position. This battle is over. It has been won. He has a lion, next slide, striped over his shoulder. In the secular world, the sign of tyranny. In the Bible, Satan. Next slide, please. And you can see the sword in the sheath, the defensive position. And on one side of liberty, you see a small statue of tyranny, with that very same soldier standing on the chest of the king, having won the battle, broken the chains of tyranny, and found the peace of the Bible. And as you look at the main statue, you will see the broken chains on his hands and feet. On the other side of this statue is the statue of peace. We broke the chains of tyranny and found the peace of the Bible. And underneath, stepping on Plymouth Rock. Again and again. Stepping on Plymouth Rock. We started our journey around the monument with the embarkation, leaving Europe to start a new life based on biblical law. We ended by stepping on Plymouth Rock, the sign of the overthrow of tyranny. We left Europe, we broke the chains of tyranny, stepped on Plymouth Rock, and found the peace of the Bible. People, that is the Pilgrim story, nothing else. They came here for the freedoms and liberties you find by using the Bible as your textbook for life. And I have to be honest, I tell this story to an awful lot of people. And people look at me and they say, Bible, freedom, I don't buy it. Explain this to me. Wives, submit to your husbands. What does that have to do with freedom? I suggest they finish the chapter. Husbands, love your wives the way Christ loved the church and gave himself for it. In a covenant promise, there are always two sides. And when those two sides come together, there is no better relationship. Young ladies, if you ever find a man that will treat you the way Christ treated the church, marry him. On the back of the statue, there's a quote. Folks, 102 came on the Mayflower, 51 died the first winter. Yet in the first 10 years, they started self-rule, free trade, capitalism, land ownership, all in 10 years. And at the end of 10 years, Mass Bay showed up, Boston, with over 1,000 people. And they were sick from coming over the ocean. Our doctor, Dr. Sam Fuller, went down there to help them out. And while he was there, he discovered they were having a hard time putting their politics together. They didn't involve everybody. So Sam suggested to them what we did in Plymouth. And what we did, again, is we formed our government after the Congregational Church, where we elected our officials. We worked from the bottom up, not the top down. We were in charge, and we told them to do it, and they did it. Then our whole country did it. So we in Plymouth do credit Sam Fuller and the remaining 51 Pilgrims for the way we are governed today. But folks, we're not the only ones, because when that event took place, Governor William Bradford wrote this quote, "Thus out of small beginnings, greater things have been produced by his hand that gives all things of nothing and gives being to all things that are. And as one small candle may light 1,000, so the light here kindled has shone unto many, yea, in some sort to our whole nation. Let the glorious name of Jehovah have all the praise." And that statue of faith is facing Europe, and faith brought our pilgrims here to start a new life. And that quote is facing the rest of our nation, to let our nation know what really happened in Plymouth. And what really happened in Plymouth has nothing to do with buckles of turkey. It has everything to do with the founding of our country. Because our country was founded on Christian principles, and that is good. Because Christianity is inclusive. You do not need to be a Christian to reap the benefits of a Christian society. God did not say all Christians are equal under the law. He said all people. And now my wife and I believe it is our job to let our country know they live in a Christian nation based on Christian principles. Can we advance that, please? Folks, that is the Forefathers Monument. Are there any questions? I am commonly asked one question, and it's hard for you to see it from this distance with the doing the PowerPoint, but if you looked at it closely, you would notice all the women on the monument do not have eyeballs, and the men do. And there is a reason for that. There's a reason for everything. Hammett's symbolization was absolutely amazing. Now, folks, I'm going to tell you something that it's a little hard for me to tell you this, but I have to. Men and women are different. I know, but they're different. And we have different strengths and we have different weaknesses. And when we come together as a whole, see, we bring those together. Now, who do the women represent up on the monument? Faith, morality, education, kind of an inward strength. Who do the men represent? Law, liberty, external. And when you bring the two together, you got a whole. I'm going to tell you a little story. My wife's mother died in 1980. We took her up to New Hampshire to bury her just this side of the Canadian border. Now, when you go up that far, there aren't many places to stay. We stayed at a hotel called the Foxy Lady. Appropriately named, the place was a dump. but it had a Gideon's Bible. So my wife picks up the Gideon's Bible. She starts reading it. Yeah. Then she stole it. But you're supposed to steal Gideon's Bibles. That's what they... Anyway, she takes the Bible and she brings it home. Now she's reading it 24 hours a day. I'm ready to strangle her. She starts watching the 700 Club 24 hours a day. I was going to kick her out of the house. I finally said to her, I'm going to show you how wrong you are, how this Bible thing, how foolish it is. And I picked up that Gideon's Bible and I started looking at it. You know what happened? I became a Christian. So you see what just happened? With my wife's inward strength, she drew me to Christ. Now what do? I tell other people about it, external. And when you bring the two together, man, you got something going on. I love being politically incorrect because it's correct. Anybody have any questions? If they're tough, my wife will answer. Yes. How tall is the monument? The monument is 81 feet high. It is the largest freestanding granite monument in the United States. The original design for the monument was to be 150 feet high, but had to be cut in half because of that little fundraising problem called the Civil War. So you may wonder why Faith is so much bigger than the other statues. Faith was completed before they cut it in half. So the other statues should be in the same scale as Faith, but they had to cut it down. And besides that, Faith should be bigger, right?
Was crushed and thrown into the bay. Is it the same design?
When
they crushed the portico.
The portico of Plymouth Rock is much different than the one Hammett Billings put up there. It's sad because his was absolutely beautiful. The one up there now looks like a Roman Colosseum. It just doesn't even fit into the town. But his was incredible, and it had an attic above it where the first 51 pilgrims died. Their bones were put in the attic. Yeah. But then we took it down. They took it down, so we lost the attic. So there's a box up on the hill across from Plymouth Rock that contains the bones of the first 51 pilgrims that died that first winter. Yeah.
Somebody must have a question.
How well received are you all in Plymouth with the locals?
So how well are we received in Plymouth with the locals? The locals aren't too bad. They avoid us if they don't like our story, which is a lot of people. The officials do not like our story. I think we were telling Linda today, the DCR, which is the state of Massachusetts Rangers, I guess that's what they are. They don't like us at all. So when you guys went down there with Leo, he's not allowed by one particular man to go into the portico and talk about the monument.
Plymouth Rock.
He is told, you are not coming in here, that I do that. So Leo, rather than battle, he just...
That's Plymouth Rock, right? He does that, right?
Yeah, is that what I don't know if I said it was Plymouth Rock, but it's Plymouth Rock, but you cannot go to see Plymouth Rock with Leo when this man is working. So he usually says, you go take a look and then I'll tell you the story over here.
Yeah. It's not my job to go nose to nose with someone from the state because I'm there to tell a story, and so that's what we do. But Nancy and I also host the National Day of Prayer every May up at the Forefathers Monument, and the Forefathers Monument is controlled by the state of Massachusetts, so we have to get a permit to go up there, and it takes us about 6 months to get the permit because they don't want us doing the National Day of Prayer up there. But we tell our legislator, we finally get the permit and we go up there, but they're very difficult, very hard to get along with. And we do a lot of events with Kirk Cameron at the monument, and we can't put his name on the permit. If we put his name on the permit, they won't give it to us. So we have to really be very careful.
Yeah, when he was up filming Monumental, they didn't like all the praying, and I think he said something about believing that marriage was between a man and a woman, which is really wrong, so he made a lot of enemies that way. So we've been trying to fight back with love because we know that's what we're supposed to do. So we try as hard as we can. We're not going to compromise. We're not going to stop telling the true story, because that's why we're there. But, you know, it is what it is. So.
Can you give an example of how they tell the story that's not true?
At the Plymouth
As
Plantation.
opposed to, at Plymouth Plantation, like what some of the things that they would say that obscures the real story? Like how would they tell
Well, in 2020 was our 400th anniversary. Plymouth turned 400 years old, and we had all kinds of stuff going on. Nancy and I, our organization had over 200 group tours, every one of them canceled because of the pandemic. But the theme from the town and the plantation for that celebration was the Pilgrims came here to kill Indians and steal land. And that was the theme of the 400th anniversary. Now, you folks live here in Florida. Are you going to pack your bags and come to Plymouth to talk about killing Indians and stealing land, which is totally untrue, but that's how they change the story, and that's what they do. Plymouth Plantation, the way it's built is perfect. The housing's perfect, but the story is not. So you have to be very discerning when you go and talk to them, or most other people in Plymouth, because they change the whole story around. When we started doing the 400th anniversary, we couldn't use the word celebrate. We weren't celebrating the founding of our country. We were mourning it because of the bad treatment of the Indians. That never happened in Plymouth. We signed a peace treaty with them, but we couldn't use the word celebrate. And so Nancy, that we found this 5 years before the event, so Nancy and I started putting together events, and the first one was Celebrate Family, Celebrate Liberty, Celebrate 5 years in a row, and they wouldn't advertise for us. They wouldn't tell people to come because we used the word celebrate. Until the end, they finally decided maybe we should stop doing that because nobody's coming.
There's a little mix of, I think they're trying harder there's a few people there that tell the true story, and I think they're trying harder to figure out just how to get people there. You know, they asked one of the local pastors, you know, what do I have to do to get your people here? And he said to them, it's simple, just tell the truth. That's all you have to do. We're looking for the truth. That's why people come to us, is so we can tell them the true story. We don't personally go to Plymouth Plantation. We're really not welcome there. A lot of our groups will want Leo to take them through, but they would prefer that we did not go there, because they want us to tell the story that they train all their people to tell. So hopefully with a lot of prayer, because it's an unbelievable replica and it would be so wonderful if the Christian message was spoken there. How many of you have been to Plymouth Plantation? Okay, so a few, and some have had really good experiences. So, and that's great. We hope to have that keep happening. There was one thing, they took out the last verse of "Let the glorious name of Jehovah be praised." I think that was something out of the 400th.
Yeah, that scripture written on the back of the monument, it ends with, "May Jehovah have all the praise." So during the 400th anniversary, they took that phrase out. They wouldn't say that. They wouldn't allow that to happen.
They just left it out.
And they've been trying to put us out of business for 21 years. And I think we've worn them out. I think they finally said, let them go. We're not going to get rid of them. They've been doing it for 21 years, and they've done everything to get rid of us. But we're still there.
Yeah, amen. Exactly.
Other groups come to the monument to tell a story, whatever their version of it is, or other tour groups, do they come to tell?
Probably, but there was a tour guide she's no longer living now, but that was her thing. She did not tell the faith story. I don't know how you could go up there with faith being the first thing, but she did.
She actually stood up and said, I'm going to do a tour of the monument, and I'm not going to talk about faith. I said to her, that's going to be a really short tour. I mean, main statue is faith. We live in an unusual place, and if we didn't get the pushback, we wouldn't be doing our job, so we're okay with that. absolutely okay with that. As long as the Christian community supports us, because there's no doubt what we do. We've made our commitment, and if the community doesn't commit back to us, and I'm talking the local community, what are you going to do? You know? Yeah, we're right there. So we need to get the church to start working together, not again, but together, because the church has a little issue working together, and we need that to change. We need the church has to stand up. It's time for the church to be the church. And I gave a tour of the monument to Eric Metaxas, and he wrote a book called A Message to the American Church. Get it. Read that book. He's right on the money. What the church is not doing. See, God tells us, if my people who are called by my name, not if secular people, my people, we need to stand up. If we're going to proclaim to be his people, we need to stand up and behave as if we were, boldly, and not back down. And that's where we are today. We need the church to be bold. And we love to fight. I mean, all the denominations, we love, what don't we have in common? Let's do that. You know, I do work we do the Monumental, obviously. I had a Christian radio station from Tennessee call me and say, you can't do that. That monument is evil. I said, well, why is it evil? Because the Masons laid the cornerstone. I said, are you telling me because the Masons laid the cornerstone, God can't use that monument? The Masons are stronger than... I've seen more people come to Christ at that monument than any other place in Plymouth. And I got a Christian organization telling me it's evil. We like to pick on what we don't have in common. Were you sprinkled or were you dunked? Oh, you were dunked? I can't do business with you. I mean, it gets crazy. We have to start pulling together and be in the church. We have to follow guys like Eric and do what we need to do to stand up. It's time. Handwriting's on the wall.
It's like in Israel when you go, the Muslims can do all the tours, but they don't go in, Arabs, but they don't go into the tomb.
Yeah.
Tell some story.
There's a question over here?
Yes, how were the statues, or who were the statues, where to place them on the monument?
Who decided where to place them?
Yeah.
Hammett Billings.
Him himself.
The whole thing was designed by Hammett Billings. And what happened with Hammett is he said, I'm going to build this monument, and I'm going to raise all the money.
Yeah.
Kind of a no-brainer, right? So they said, okay, build a monument. Unfortunately, he died before the monument was finished. It took so long to build the foolish thing. The first donation was taken during George Washington's administration. It was completed in 1889. So it took longer to build that monument than any monument in our country's history. So other people had to pick up the ball, and obviously he couldn't finance it. He was dead. So a different group of people financed every part of the monument. The Statue of Education was financed by the children in Massachusetts. They pooled their money and paid for education. Law was financed by the lawyers from Connecticut. They paid for law. Morality, are you ready for this? The Massachusetts legislature paid for morality. And we've been paying ever since. And liberty, the federal Congress paid for liberty.
So there was a blueprint or something before he died that the rest of the people
Yes,
followed?
yes, yes. And there's a book that was written by a friend of ours, like a coffee table book about the monument, which has all that information in it. And yeah, Hammett Billings designed it. He was behind the whole thing. Yeah.
We recognize you're not going to get any support or sympathy from the woke administration of Massachusetts, but what about the churches surrounding that whole area? How much support are you getting from those churches, whether it be Baptist, Independent, Anglican, or what have you?
He's asking how much support we get from local churches, is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't mean financial support, do you?
Well, I'll be honest with you. We're in Massachusetts. We're not in Florida. And churches in Massachusetts are very territorial. And they don't like other people speaking in their place. So we don't get a lot of support from the churches in the area. We get more support from churches, well, like from here, that come from out of state, and they support us. A lot from Pennsylvania, a lot from Florida. But the churches in Massachusetts are not very supportive. They think they know it all, and they just don't like sharing their pulpit. They just won't do it. Yeah.
Most of them Presbyterian?
Same thing, little weak. You know, are you a Presbyterian? Okay. Keep in mind, even the Congregational Church, the Pilgrims founded the Congregational Church. John Robinson founded it by having his congregation elect him pastor, and that's the beginning of the Congregational Church. So he founded the Congregational Church. The only church in Plymouth that supports us is a Congregational Church, and they do support us.
Hello.
She's making me come. I told
The
her.
monument gets struck by lightning?
Can what?
The monument gets struck by lightning?
Can the monument get struck by lightning?
Well, that's a good question, and if you look at the monument and you can see the beautiful statue of Faith, right here on the finger of Faith is a lightning rod that runs all the way down the back into the concrete. So that does get hit by lightning on a regular basis, but we do have a lightning rod that takes it down so the monument won't come down. And when people come up there and I tell them the faith story of the Pilgrims and they don't agree with me, I say, would you come back during a lightning storm and hold on to that wire? Yeah. It is the highest point closest to the ocean in Plymouth.
Got another question?
Is there any significance about where that monument is? I noticed when we went there that it's away from the, well, it's in the
It's in the neighborhood.
neighborhood.
Yeah,
It's not
yeah.
where you think it would be.
And it is in a neighborhood, but it was completed in 1889. And in 1889, there were no trees between it and the waterfront. So you could see it from the waterfront. You could actually walk right up to it. No houses were there, but since then they put in trees, they put in houses, and they block it. And the only way you can see it is if you're standing next to it or out on a boat. If you're in a boat, you can see it. Other than that, they've pretty much covered the whole monument.
There was talk about moving it, trying to get it down to the waterfront, but I think it's too heavy and it would sink. So they
Yeah,
decided
the
to
waterfront's
just
all
leave it.
landfill. It would have sunk. And besides that, it would have cost $3 million to move it. So, yeah.
Who owns the monument? Unfortunately, the state of Massachusetts. So we were telling Linda earlier that we're working with Kirk because if you go close to the monument, you can see that the grout is starting to thin out. And so he had talked to us about trying to form some kind of a association so we can raise money to fix it. He apparently doesn't think he has a problem getting the money. We just have to work out with the state, which we're going to do when we get home. How do we go about doing that? How, for them to let us give them the money to fix the grout? Because honestly, I think if it fell apart, if it's loose and we have a bad storm, we get some crazy storms, it could topple over. And if it does, they're never going to put it back, So we really need prayer for that, that we would be able to get that going when we get back so we can fix it up. The hands were broken, they're fixed now, and there were a couple other things, but it's our monument. It belongs to the people of faith. It's the national monument to the forefathers, and it's our responsibility, because I don't think there's anything else really in our country that tells the story it does. So we got to work really hard to get that so it's fixed, and so someone's really making it special, because it should be special.
It is special, yeah.
It is, but it should be more special.
Yeah.
So,
I see.
yeah.
Do you have others that help you with this?
No. We have 2 part-time people that work for us. A friend of mine, actually a friend that brought me to the Lord a long time ago, works part-time for us, and then we have a volunteer, a friend of ours, and she volunteers every Wednesday, and then we have another young girl who helps us part-time. We have nobody to do tours.
I'm
We
the
have
only one that
nobody.
does tours, but we're trying to film what I do so it can be done when I'm not there. I'm having a hard time getting young men like him to dress like a pilgrim and take over for me. So, and I'm 72, so it's time for us to try to do that. But in the meantime, we're filming everything we do so it can be readily available to people. We already have the monument done. We have to do a walking tour and economics and all the other things that we do. But we are working on that. Plus, we have our building. Our building was built in 1749, and so there's a lot of work to keep the building standing. And we have a lot of work to do there. But you're looking at the guy that gets all the credit for doing all the tours. He also gets to empty the trash. I am the maintenance man, and that's the way it works.
Yeah, I wish we had a lot more time because we have some really great stories about how God, we are pilgrims. How he took us from a town 30 minutes away, put us in Plymouth, and we started a secular attraction, grinding corn at a grist mill. Was Leo the miller. And we did that for 10 years, and there's some great stories. God clearly has called us to do this, and they just don't have enough time to tell you all the great stories. But I'm trying to get them on our website. We really don't have, we have a woman came and did a tour one day, and when she was leaving, she said to me, you know, I'd like to volunteer bookkeeping for you. At the time, I was also the bookkeeper, along with everything else. So I looked at her and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is just unbelievable. And she said, I'm serious. So she went back to Ohio, and I thought, a lot of people come visit us, they get really passionate about what we're doing, and then they say, I'll be in touch, and they go away and we fade out of their memory. And she called and she said, I told you I wanted to offer my bookkeeping services. So she has an online bookkeeping, Harquin Bookkeeping, just want to throw that out. She has been doing our bookkeeping for the last 5 years. She doesn't charge us anything. And I can't even tell you what a blessing that was, because I had the burden of being a bookkeeper, of which I am not. But if you own your own business, you know you do everything, no matter whether you're good at it or not, until you can get money to hire somebody. So she did that, and she still does that for us, which is such a blessing. She's a Christian woman, has an online company, and so that was huge. And there's just many things like that where we need help, that people could help. She doesn't even live here. But, so anyways, that's...
Did you all reach out to Kirk Cameron, or did he find you?
He found us. He came to do Monumental. And at the time, our pastor I think he had done Fireproof.
Just finished Fireproof. Yeah.
And he was on vacation. He came to Plymouth with his wife and all his kids. And our pastor, at the time, I don't think he was our pastor, but he's also a historian. He was taking them around town. He took them up to the monument, did all kinds of tours. He's been a historian in Plymouth for years. So he dropped them off to have lunch and came over we had the mill and we had an ice cream store. Everybody came to the ice cream store. So he came down and he's like, hey, you know, I'm just hanging out, waiting for Kirk Cameron and his family to eat lunch. And I'm like, really? And he goes, what? Oh, I should bring them here. I said, yes, maybe. So he called them up and said, you know, do you want to come have a tour of a grist mill? So he said, sure. So he brought his wife and his kids, and Leo gave them a tour of the mill. And a few years later, he came back, called us to be a part of the Monumental shooting, of which we were. We just kind of connected here and there. And then one day, I don't know what happened, he became our friend. He just fell in love with what we do. And so now he's a supporter of ours. We sell these monuments through our store for him. He came and put us on a TV show. So if you do TBN, you can look up One-on-One with Kirk Cameron. And there we are, our whole story. He came, he filmed us, he came in our store, he sat downstairs, he just became our friend and brought us a gift of 2 monuments, one just like Linda has, and then one smaller one, and went up. Leo gave him a tour through that filming and that TV show, and he looked at Leo and he said, "I can't believe what I didn't know." And here he is, the monumental guy who sells everybody all these monuments, movies, and he's loving what my husband was teaching him. So he's just a real blessing. He is genuinely, if you haven't met him, you don't know him, he is exactly who he appears to be.
There is one thing with Kirk that really bothers me. He never gets old. And that gets old. Yeah, the rest of us get old, and he looks like he was when he was 14. It's driving me nuts. Yeah.
We've had a few interesting things, and I think it's God humbling us. I mean, we got a phone call from Glenn Beck. Have you ever heard of Glenn Beck? So a friend of ours, another friend of ours, Tim Ballard, who is the founder of Operation Underground Railroad, a sex trafficking, not organization, but one that stops it. He was interviewing with Glenn Beck on his radio show, and then he started talking about us, and Glenn goes, "Oh, can we call them?" And I get a text on my phone from Tim, and he goes, "Glenn Beck's going to call you. We're on live on his radio station." I looked at Leo, and he goes, "Get to your phone." I'm like, Glenn Beck? It was unbelievable.
Guy on the other end says, this is Glenn Beck's producer. You're on in 30 seconds.
Yeah. Now, wouldn't you think, after that, we weren't on very long. He had asked us a few questions similar to what the battle we're having, and he said, just a few things, and then we hung up, and then somebody heard us on the show, and they called me, "You must be inundated with phone calls. I'm so sorry to bother you," but I was so excited. I'm like, nobody ever bothered. We never heard a word. 30,000 people were listening to that show. Nothing. So.
But it's all right. It's great that guys like Glenn pay attention to us. And I spoke at Glenn's Man of the Moon Conference in Salt Lake City. There were 20,000 people. And I've done a podcast for Glenn. And so he's a really good guy, a little neurotic, but who of us isn't, right? But real good guy, really easy to work with. And but the only reason we work with these people is we're like-minded. And that draws us. That's why we know Linda. We're like-minded. We all have the same goal. And for us to reach that goal, we have to work together. It's just the way it is.
Yeah. But let me be clear. I don't want to be famous. I really don't. I know God knows that. We like coming and talking to people, but I wouldn't want to be like some of these people, I like being who we are and learning, getting people to come. We have millions of people that haven't heard the stories, so if we can travel and talk to people, that's a blessing. And if you come see us, that's a blessing. So got lots more to tell the story too, so. Anyways.
Any other questions? We're a good group.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.
Well, kind of eye-opening. Like you say, we live in Florida, and everybody has a Bible, and everybody goes to church. And New England is a very rough area, as far as it's a very primitive area, evangelical. And the question was asked about the churches. That's not a part of them. Very, very ritualistic, very liturgical. They don't want to evangelize. They just want to do what they've always done. So they're in a very tough area up there. Plus the fact, just with the community around you, But we're told that we're to be a light on a hill, and that you are. And we will pray for you as a church. And I challenge all of us, as members of this church and the church that you're in, to continue to pray for them. We kind of got it made. We're comfortable. We're happy. This is frontline stuff right here. When you're battling the government, that's frontline stuff. And we thank you for what you do. And I can maybe talk to Zach about taking your role. Yeah. You have to change his name to something. Zachariah. No, I don't think so. He can sing too. He can sing. Oh, he can sing. Well, we hope you've enjoyed it tonight. You're welcome to come up afterwards and view the statue up here. We first learned about this 4 or 5 years ago, I think. We did a staff retreat, and Linda brought the monument and went through the entire thing just like we've had tonight. How interesting it was, because we had never heard of it. We were just totally oblivious to it. And she said, "Hey, we're going to do a staff retreat on the monument." No offense. I thought, but boy, once we got into it and realized the importance and the impact of it, it really, really made a difference. And so I would encourage you to come up, and I know you guys will, I know you're tired, but just come up and talk with them. And we've got some folks here from Massachusetts, so you'll understand each other. Really? Yeah, yeah. They speak Massachusettsian. All right, let's pray and we'll be dismissed. Father, we thank you tonight. We thank you for what we've been founded on as a country. Forgive us where we have failed that, where we've turned to our own ways and resorted back to self. And we pray for tonight this ministry, this effort, this commitment. And I see in them the commitment that the forefathers had when they came to this country. And there's not much of that left anymore. So I just pray your blessings upon them and protection over them, strength and resources. And God, just meet every need that they have in accordance to your will.